Hello, everyone. As you may imagine, I am not Professor Mazar. I'm the last-minute substitute. And I didn't receive yet the short bios I have to read, so I will introduce the first speaker after he finishes. I'd like to invite Professor Jeffrey Chadwick from Brigham Young University to speak about the American expedition to Hebron, 1964 to 1966, 20 minutes from now.
Up a little bit, yeah, good like that. Great. And we got the slides. אז שלום לכולם, אני מאוד שמח להיות פה בקונפרנס מאוד חשוב, מאוד יפה, על הארכאולוגיה של יהודה ושומרון. אני רוצה לדבר על המשלחת האמריקנית לחברון, או AEH, החפירות בתל רומיידה לפני 60 שנים. קוראים לי פשוט ג'ף, ואני מלמד במכון ירושלים של בריגהאם יאנג יוניברסיטי בהר הצופים. אני חשבתי שכיף לי היום לדבר בעברית, אבל זה לא רעיון טוב, כי יש לי רק 20 דקות ואני צריך לדבר מהר מאוד. אז אני מתקדם באנגלית עכשיו. It has been, oh, there's where I'm from. Nice building. Come visit us sometime. It has been 60 years since the first excavation of Tel Romeyda was carried out by the American expedition to Hebron. This is the Tel in modern times, looking east to Machpelah in a view captured by Pascal Partouche. Hebron is located at the summit of the Judean Mountains, some 32 kilometers or 19 miles south-southwest of Jerusalem. At the time of the American expedition, prior to 1967, the area was under Jordanian control. The expedition was led by Professor Philip C. Hammond, more widely known for his decades of work at Petra in Jordan. Here at right is Hammond in his last season at Petra, and on the left at Hebron during his second season some 60 years ago. Philip was known for his expertise, his friendliness and wit, and for the khaki uniforms he and his staff sported, always bearing the oval of the American expedition. Losing pages. Visitors to Petra walked past two of his monumental excavations there, the Great Theater in the Outer Sikh and the Temple of the Winged Lions on the hill across from the Nabatean Royal Palace. Hammond excavated in Jordan, beginning with Kenyon at Jericho for a full 50 years and was honored by the royal family for his work. My own take on Philip was that he was a great personal friend as well. My relationship with Hebron began 40 years ago when Philip insisted that the only dissertation project he would approve for me was to analyze and begin publishing his Bronze and Iron Age materials from Tel Romeyda, which he had no plans to deal with otherwise. It was a great opportunity for a young guy. This photo is of that much younger me, 40 years and 20 kilos ago, on one of many outings to the Tel to survey the site and the areas he worked while there was still some sense that he had been there. A little clumsy up here. After that dissertation and popular publications on his finds at Hebron, Hammond, one day as I was visiting, opened two beverage bottles, a beer for himself and a Coke for me. And he raised his bottle and declared me a team member of the original expedition. I thought this was unusual because in 1965 I was 10 years old. But he said, "You've earned it, and so I come before you with that little bit of credential." Tel Romeda is seen in this aerial photograph from the 1980s, about when I began poking around there, 1,000 meters west of the Machpelah Shrine, which is marked by the small red arrow. At the highest point of the Tel is a medieval structure known as Der Arba'in, marked with a yellow A. Hammond called the entire Tel Site 1 with a Roman numeral, and individual excavation areas were given Arabic numbers 1 through 7. I simply use the Arabic numbers. Here, a yellow arrow points to the only visible feature remaining from Hammond's expedition, the tower of Area 1-3, which I simply call Area 3. Another arrow, labeled OS, points to the trench of Area S from Avi Ofer's excavations in the 1980s. And then in this older aerial view from 1967, just after Hammond's work ceased, Machpelah and Arba'in are likewise marked, and 2 orange arrows point to prominent excavations areas of Hammond, the Tower of Area 3 on the south and the long trench of Area 6 in the north. Hammond hoped to excavate for several seasons at Hebron, perhaps 10 years, but the War of June 1967 interrupted that plan, and 1966 turned out to be his last season. His excavation areas were all later backfilled by the landowners. In his plan of the Tel, Hammond utilized terrace lines rather than the traditional topographical waves. Here, the several excavation areas he worked are shaded in orange and labeled in red. I have added to these in different colors the excavation areas of subsequent projects by Israeli expeditions that came after Hammond. Avi Ofer excavated at Hebron with Tel Aviv University in 1984 to 1986. 20 years after Hammond had begun his work, about the same time I began poking around the place. Ofer's areas are shaded light olive green. Emanuel Eisenberg of the Israel Antiquities Authority carried out rescue excavations in an area on the Tel's lower north slope in 1999. That area is marked in blue, as is a late bronze tomb excavated in 1998 by our colleague of blessed memory, Yuval Peleg. And finally, the green dotted lines at the south side of the Tel mark the areas where Eisenberg excavated in 2014 with our colleague David Ben Shlomo of Ariel University, exposing long stretches of the city's Bronze and Iron Age fortifications and remains from the Hellenistic and Roman periods. All of these Israeli excavators have been very open and friendly with me in sharing their results, which in turn greatly helped in my own evolving assessments of all that Hammond found in the 1960s. And with that background, we'll sample some of what Hammond found. The period stratigraphy he determined included remains from the early Bronze Age, the Canaanite periods of Middle Bronze II and through Late Bronze II, and the Judahite periods of Iron Ages I and II. For well over 1,000 years, from MB2 through Iron II, there was uninterrupted settlement on the Tel. However, indications of traumatic disturbance were found from the end of Late Bronze II, of Iron Age I, and at points in Iron Age II. Abandoned after Iron Age IIc, the site revived in the Hellenistic and Roman Herodian periods, but after the Roman destruction of Judah, the Tel was not resettled as a town, and only monastic and agricultural presence was evident from later periods. In his first season, the summer of 1964, Hammond opened 3 areas. In 2 squares of Area 1, on the upper east terrace of the Tel, he found portions of a house structure erected in Middle Bronze II, which was occupied without interruption, but with multiple surface layers, until the end of Late Bronze II. At the outset of Iron I, that structure was replaced by a pillared court house of the typical 4-room type, built on a different orientation. Hammond is seen here in the photograph in the remains of that Iron Age house. It was utilized with repairs and resurfacings until the end of Iron II. A similar stratigraphic sequence from EB, MB2, LB, and the Iron Age was found in the long Area 6 trench excavated in 1966 on the upper north slope of the Tel. In the lower extension of that trench, evidence of occupation in the Hellenistic and Roman Herodian periods was found, paralleling what Ben Shlomo later recovered on the south side of the Tel. In the 2 upper squares, which were much deeper, of Area 6, the Bronze and Iron Age sequence was found in contiguous rooms which were used and reused with alterations again and again for over 1,000 years. Evidence of destruction and burning was found in some of the rooms at the end of LB2, but those chambers were refurbished for use in Iron 1. Signs of destruction between the final Iron 2 phases is probably to be attributed to the Assyrian campaign of Sennacherib. In room 1096 of Square B at upper right, the LB strata yielded specific finds which helped date the terminal LB2 occupation, including a scarab of Egypt's 19th dynasty, belatedly identified in my own review of all the AH objects. The scarab was cut from limestone, seemingly local, and bore the prenomen of Ramses II, User Ma'at Ra Setepen Ra, datable to the 13th century BCE. This helped in assessing Hammond's LB pottery and other finds from secure settings. I make a point of this only because 30 years ago, the narrative about Hebron was that it had no LB settlement. Avi Ofer's excavations from the 1980s paralleled much of the stratigraphic sequence discovered 20 years earlier by Hammond. And Ofer was very kind in sharing his information with me, but he did not acknowledge any LB occupation at the site. And his views circulated well prior to the appearance of any of my work on Hammond's finds. When I reviewed Ofer's publications, however, I found a curious disconnect. In the famous tablet house of his Area S Trench, Ofer initially reported finding, quote, bowls and decorative designs typical of the end of the late Bronze Age in a stratum of the early 12th or perhaps even the late 13th century BCE, unquote. But later in the new encyclopedia, he made no reference to those LB materials and asserted that, quote, during the late Bronze Age, the city of Hebron was abandoned, unquote. But there was an LB settlement at Hebron. Hammond found this robustly. Identifiable sherds and objects from the late Bronze Age were recovered in 4 of Hammond's excavated areas, all within the assessed city wall lines. And in a 2014 selective sampling reassessment that I did a few years ago with some students, one surprise was that the frequency of LB sherds was higher than either MB2 or Iron 1, perhaps suggesting a more robust settlement in the LB than in either the previous or following periods. 5 burial caves, all previously robbed, were cleared on the north, south, and east slopes of the Tell, outside the assumed fortification lines. A 6th cave was excavated and reported by Peleg and Eisenstadt, as already mentioned. Emanuel Eisenberg's excavations on the lower north slope of the Tell in 1999 yielded Iron Age finds similar to AEH areas 1 and 3, and also helped in understanding the fortifications unearthed in Area 3. 2 different fortification walls were found by Eisenberg, one of Middle Bronze II and one of Early Bronze III, running one aside the other, as seen here in the upper right part of the photo. The MB wall's cyclopean masonry contrasted from the smaller stones of the earlier EB wall. This prompted a reevaluation on my part of Hammond's understanding of Area 3. In Area 3, which was excavated for 2 seasons on the south side of the Tell in 1964 and 66, Hammond unearthed the Middle Bronze II fortification wall tower, abutting a segment of early bronze fortification wall. Turning attention now to those structures, this photo from 1964 shows Hammond himself, pointed by the arrow, standing atop the remains of the Middle Bronze II tower, which he designated Wall 1. The tower was preserved to a height of 5.6 meters above the bedrock on which it was built. Atop its cyclopean stonework, where modern Arab terracing stone filled gaps in the upper courses, cut ashlars laid in header and stretcher format, pointed out by the arrow you now see, demonstrate repairs to the wall put in place during Iron Age 2. In the next photo, looking southward down from Hammond's position atop Wall Tower 1, we see excavation squares from 1964 revealing another large fortification wall, quite different in size and masonry. This wall, some 6.5 meters wide, stood only 2.4 meters above bedrock, less than half the surviving height of the tower. Hammond designated this as Wall 2 and initially dated it to the Middle Bronze II, the same as the much earlier and taller Wall Tower 1. But he later agreed it must be Early Bronze. He also noted that the top part of this wall, for half a meter downward, appeared to be an overbuild from Iron Age 2. The entire Area 3 plan shows the lower Wall 2, excavated in 1964 in the bottom part of the visual, and the taller Wall Tower 1, excavated in 1966 in the upper part of the visual. Beneath scant Roman period remains in the upper soil layers, the primary stratigraphy around both walls was from Iron II back to Middle Bronze II, with an early bronze stratum also found in squares A, C, and D. Excavation of the tower in 1966 was complicated by the presence of olive trees, which the landowner did not want harmed, hence the angled trenches in the north. When the revealed remains were reconstructed in diagram, the plan of the tower was proposed thusly. In this visual, black represents the portions actually unearthed, and red depicts the presumed lines of the structure in unexcavated areas. A probable doorway just over 1 meter wide was found in the northern wall of the structure. Both Wall Tower 1 and Lower Wall 2 were built on bedrock, one abutting the other. In my reconstruction of the original structure, a matching tower was posited opposite Hammond's Tower 1, forming a gateway into the city at this location. This model assumes that the truncation of Lower Wall 2, here, only makes sense if passage to the inside of the wall line existed here, from outside to inside. The extent segment at right is a bit of wall overexposed in the 1980s. In this three-dimensional reconstruction, which I prepared for Hammond, I suggested that Wall 2, depicted in blue lines, should actually not be dated to Middle Bronze II, but rather to the Early Bronze. This would match the two different city walls from those periods which were found on the north slope of the tell. The difference in width and masonry style and the smaller stones of Wall 2 suggested it's not of the same era as the Middle Bronze Cyclopean Wall, Tower 1, abutting it. And this was the suggested model for Bronze City's fortifications and southern gate that I presented in the first popular publication of the American Expedition's finds in Bar in 2005, just 20 years ago. Now, in this view from 30 years ago, I'm standing on the eastern corner of the Middle Bronze Tower, Wall 1. Those remains are still visible in Area 3. The lower Wall 2 at left had been reburied, and a huge pile of small stones had been heaped atop it by the landowners. In this more recent view from just 10 years ago, I stand on that same corner, but the pile of small stones has been removed and the Cyclopean masonry of Tower 1's face is again visible. Wall 2, however, still remains buried at left. Returning to the earlier view from 30 years ago, it was still possible to see the building stones from the very top of Lower Wall 2, at left, in a sounding that Ofer dug into the backfill in the 1980s. The red arrow actually points to a stone of the Wall 2 masonry. Look for that stone in the next slide. Here, in section depictions looking west and north, a red arrow points to that same stone. And the relationship of taller MB Wall Tower 1 abutting earlier EB Wall 2 is illustrated. Note the depression in the bedrock visible in the north section, a passageway or even a gutter in the gateway. Note also that over half a meter of the, half a meter of the upper part of Wall 2 is actually the Iron Age 2 overbuild Hammond detected atop the EB base of the structure. Here is another view of the excavation of Wall 2 in 1964, seen from atop Tower 1 to emphasize Square A, dug on the south side of Wall 2, all the way to bedrock upon which both walls were built. The stratigraphy of the area was very carefully recorded by Hammond. And this is his section drawing of Square A, facing west, showing the intricate stratigraphy from Iron 2 all the way down to early Bronze Age. The south face of Wall 2, the lower wall, is seen at right in this drawing. So here is a simplified diagram of that stratigraphy and that section. Soil layers from every period back to Middle Bronze II, identified by their latest ceramics, ran directly to the face of Wall 2. And an early Bronze stratum was actually cut into during Middle Bronze II, probably when Tower 1 was being constructed on the other side of the wall. I proposed to Hammond that this, along with the difference in masonry, actually pointed to Wall 2 being an EB wall. And Hammond finally agreed. This impacts the way I understand the findings of Eisenberg and Ben Shlomo in 2014. They excavated extensively in two long areas, 53A and 53B, along the southern city wall line, exposing more of the Cyclopean masonry of the Middle Bronze Wall in the background there, along with the top of an Iron Age 2 fortification running in front of it. Their Iron 2 wall runs right in line with the EB wall in Hammond's Area 3. So I ask myself if these Iron 2 remains could have been built over much deeper remnants of an EB fortification, which in some places may not even still be extant. This slide shows the line of the 53B Iron Age wall overlaid over my proposed line for the EB wall. But another complication was recently found to the east of Area 3, and we'll end with that. It is that the proposed gateway of Area 3 now appears to have been blocked sometime in Iron Age 2. This photo shows the Cyclopean masonry of Tower 1 and its inset gate frame, Wall 18, but with much smaller masonry running eastward from the end of Wall 18, as seen to the right of the dotted line I add here. That smaller stonework extending eastward of that seam was found to include worked ashlars typical of Iron 2 style, which were noticed when Eisenberg and Ben Shlomo extended the trench eastward in 2014, an action for which they kindly invited me to be present. This changed the way I now evaluate the Area 3 gateway and towers model. I now suggest that if there was an opposing eastern gate tower, then either the gateway itself was much wider than I originally posited, or the gate tower no longer exists, having been removed during Iron Age 2 and replaced by an Iron Age 2 extension of the fortification wall. But what could account for the loss of a proposed eastern gate tower? Two events from the 8th century may be involved: the Great Earthquake, which caused all kinds of destruction, and certainly the need to repair the wall, but also the Assyrian campaign of 701, which destroyed numerous cities of Judah, and which might also be the reason that a gate tower at Hebron would be assaulted and destroyed beyond repair. In any event, the way that the Area 3 remains must now be modeled as they existed at the end of Iron 2, and as they exist today still in excavated form, is here depicted by this revised reconstruction, where what is known as Wall D of Iron Age 2, perhaps built in the 7th century BCE, extends eastward from Wall Tower 1. And we are out of time. To wrap up, I'll note that the early and Middle Bronze Age issues here were published in 2018 in the Aaron Mayer Festschrift, and the late Bronze issues were published in 2019, a conference volume edited by Mayer, Shai, and McKinney. And the Iron Age issues are set for publication this year in a volume from the Iron Age Urbanism Conference of 2022. I hope I did a little better in English than in Hebrew. And of course, I highly recommend, last and not least, the great final report volume for Hebron published by Eisenberg and Ben Shlomo. Toda Rabbah, and Am Yisrael Chai.